This is the brand new Polar Grid X2 Pro. It takes Polar's existing Grid X series, which is designed for adventure and outdoors, and merges it with all the latest and greatest features from the Polar Vantage V3 that was announced just a few months ago. This includes a new offline mapping capability with downloadable maps for everywhere in the world. It includes dual frequency or multi-band GPS for higher GPS accuracy. It includes a new optical heart rate sensor, as well as, of course, that AMOLED display that you see right there. But it also includes a bunch of new software features as well that are coming to not only the Polar Vantage V3, but additional existing Polar devices too. In this video, I'm going to walk you through all the brand new features on the Grid X2 Pro compared to the existing Grid X, as well as compared to the Polar Vantage V3. And then, of course, the goal here being to go from this hands-on first look sort of video, my initial impressions after a few workouts, up to the full in-depth review, roughly about the time frame to start shipping in early April. At that point, I'll have plenty more experience on it. In particular, some really kind of epic / mostly stupid, dumb ideas that I've got, some routes and stuff that should put this thing like to its absolute limits. Now, the very first thing to know about this watch is the brand new 1.39-inch AMOLED display. To understand what an AMOLED display is, I've got 4 watches here. The 2 left ones are MIP-based displays, or memory and pixel displays, and the 2 right ones are AMOLED displays. I have the AMOLED displays configured in always-on mode, which means that you're going to see that time there. But then once you were to wake these up by simply raising your wrist up like this, it'll go to full brightness of the display like you see right there. Meanwhile, over on this side, I can go to full brightness by just simply tapping that light button. Now, of course, moving to an AMOLED display should not be a surprise to anyone. Virtually the entire industry is shifting that way. Now we've seen Polar basically knock out the Vantage V series being AMOLED now, as well as the Grid X series being AMOLED. Now, the obvious difference for an AMOLED display compared to a MIP-based display is, of course, the brightness and the brilliance of that display. Likewise, the other upside to an AMOLED display is it's actually way better in dimmer conditions. I live in the Netherlands. It's like dark and dreary all year round. So having the AMOLED display there actually gives it much better readability and visibility compared to a MIP-based display. The downside, though, is you tend to get a little bit less battery life compared to an equivalent unit on a MIP-based display, though that gap is closing more and more. Speaking of battery life, let's talk about the Grid X2 Pro as well as the Polar Vantage V3. Here are the battery life charts you see on the screen there. Actually, I'm just going to show one chart because it's the same. Why is it the same, you ask? Because it's the same battery. It's the same battery, the same display, the same firmware. And that's going to be the most important trend when you compare these 2 watches from Polar. Polar is taking the approach that these 2 watches are equal across the board with the exception of the case. It is as simple as that, folks. It is just the case. All the software will remain the same between these 2 watches going forward. I'm going to dive into that in just a second. Okay, and a quick note, if you are finding this video interesting or useful, now's a great time to whack that subscribe button or the like button. It really does help out this video and the channel quite a bit. Now, the next new big feature of the Grid X2 Pro compared to the past Grid X is the addition of multi-band or dual frequency GPS. The idea behind this gives you more frequencies of GPS satellites to connect to, which in turn will help out GPS accuracy in tougher environments. And in fact, this is where we get to the singular difference between these 2 units that is beyond just the actual case bezel sort of thing, which is the antenna design. Because antenna designs for GPS watches are arguably the most important part of GPS accuracy these days, they're all using the same GPS chipset, the antenna designs vary based on the materials of the case around them. And Polar says they spent extra time on the Grid X2 Pro's antenna design to be able to take advantage of some of the materials around it to give even better accuracy. And while I've started putting that through its paces in my testing already, my upcoming trips that I've got planned should cement my opinion on that one way or the other by the end of it. And I'll be putting it up against all of its competitors in that same general price bucket, or at least that same market consideration bucket, if you will. Now, the next feature is one of the most important software features that does, of course, depend on the hardware, including 32 gigs of internal storage that's been added to this watch. That is offline mapping. So both the Vantage V3 as well as the Grid X2 Pro have the ability to download offline maps. In fact, by default, when you get this watch, it includes both North America and European maps on there at a medium detail level. You can go onto their site and download totally for free other maps for anywhere in the world, as well as more detailed maps for both Europe and North America. It's a relatively straightforward process, and then once it's on there, you'll be able to see all that data on the watch itself. You'll see those maps if you have a route loaded or even don't have a route loaded. They'll both show up in both scenarios when you're outdoors using GPS. And Polar noted in one of their media calls that they do plan to add more detail to the maps from like a labeling standpoint. They don't have an exact time frame for that as to when that'll occur, but it is on their software update radar at some point, and of course that will come to both of these units. One new feature that's worthwhile noting within that realm is that Polar is adding the ability to see your historical track on the watch on the map itself. That's actually a feature that was missing on the Vantage V3, and I gave them quite a bit of flack for it because I got in a situation out in the middle of absolutely nowhere where I couldn't figure out where I came from anymore because that particular historical trail just straight up disappeared, which was not ideal at all. Now, in that same vein, there's another pretty cool feature coming to not just these two watches, but every Polar route capable watch, which is Strava Routes. Finally, it is here. Up until now, they've had commute routing, but now they will have Strava routing starting in early April. That will allow you to go ahead and just automatically sync your Strava routes into the watch to go ahead and navigate on top of the maps on these two watches, as well as using just regular breadcrumb style trail routing for other watches. I'll dive into that more in my in-depth review because it's not quite enabled yet, but it will be by the time my review comes out, so definitely stay tuned for that. Next up in that same sort of outdoor adventure kind of realm is 3 new data fields. Well, 2 new data fields and one like under the covers data processing thingamajig. The first one is to now show vertical speed, so you'll see that as a potential data field that you can add, as well as VAM, which is essentially your ascent speed, if you will. And you'll see that also there. And then the half of one is the addition of 3D speed. Now you won't actually see like a 3D speed metric on the watch. Instead, it's going to be toggled behind the scenes for basically those high gradient type scenarios. But it does take a pretty steep angle for that to actually start mattering in most scenarios. Next up on the hardware side is the addition of the new optical heart rate sensor on the back, which is their Gen 4 optical heart rate sensor. This is powered by Elixir. Elixir is not technically the name of the optical heart rate sensor. It's the name of all the algorithm fusion that goes on behind the scenes. It's basically just, they're internally calling it their Gen 4 optical heart rate sensor, so that's what you want to refer it to. Now, with that optical heart rate sensor, you're going to get wrist-based temperature at night while you're sleeping, so you'll see that automatically each morning when you wake up. In addition, you'll also get ECG capability. Keep in mind, though, the ECG capability here is merely doing a simple ECG trace. It is not going ahead and identifying any sort of conditions like AFib or something like that, like most other watches that advertise ECG functions. Doing that sort of AFib detection that you'd see on most watches from Apple, Garmin, Samsung, Fitbit, etc., does typically require FDA certification and massive studies and years of medical stuff. Polar's not doing any of that. They're just simply saying, here's your ECG trace. You can export out as a PDF, give it to your doctor in case you do see a moment in time where you want to do that trace then and there and be able to show your doctor later on. Next, we get to something new from this optical heart rate sensor that was not there for the Polar Vantage V3, which is the ability to auto-correct your heart rate traces when the heart rate goes wrong mid-activity. So let me just set the stage for what's going on here. First off, Polar says that as part of developing this, they've added 20,000 lines of code to the algorithm for just the heart rate side since the V3 has released in anticipation for this new V2 software update. So what Polar's looking at doing here is to retroactively change your heart rate data in your file on the watch before it even syncs anywhere else when it realizes something went wrong. So to understand what Polar's talking about here, imagine you're doing interval workouts, right? And you start off at interval and you just hammer it for, I don't know, 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes, whatever the case is. Obviously, your heart rate is really, really high, but on the watch, it's like just not high at all. It looks like you did almost nothing. When you stop at interval, Polar says that they're basically looking at that data behind the scenes, and if they notice an anomaly there, they'll actually go back and try to retroactively apply what they think was the correct heart rate to it. Now, the thing is, this won't really help you in real time out on the track or whatever it may be doing. Instead, it's actually correcting your data so that when you go ahead and sync afterwards, you'll be like, that all looks correct now compared to being clearly off during that interval. However, what's cool is that I can actually validate and demonstrate this. And the reason is that Polar's watches broadcast your heart rate in real time. So what I've been doing is I've been recording both that real-time stream to a phone app to record exactly what it's doing in real time, but also letting this change the data behind the scenes at the end of every activity. Now, I'm going to dive into the nuances of this in my in-depth review. Note that this is not like a brand new Polar thing. Apple's been doing it for a while, other companies as well. I think Samsung's done a little bit of this too, and a few others that will retroactively adjust the heart rate after the fact. But this is something, there's obviously two sides to that coin. One side would argue just get the darn heart rate right to begin with. The other side would be like, well, if we couldn't do that, then at least fix it for the analytics after the fact. And again, that's all things I'll dive into down the road. Okay, so with all the heart rate stuff covered up here for now, let's just do some quick other new features. Number one, they've added a flashlight, not to the front of the display, but using the display itself. You can basically just turn it on as a virtual flashlight. Two, they've added 2 new watch faces that'll come to both of these watches as well. One digital, one analog. And then 3, they've increased the price by, so let's just talk about that. So there are 3 models of the Polar Grid X2 Pro. There are 2 base editions and there's 1 Titan edition. This is the Titan one that you've been seeing this entire time. It does come with these leather straps. It comes with both leather straps, bands, as well as the existing kind of base band straps that you see right there. I'm not gonna lie, the leather strap is flippin' beautiful. Like, this is super nice. It may not show up as well on the camera there, but this is one of the nicest leather straps I've seen in a long time. It looks fantastic. During workouts, of course, you're gonna wanna wear it with this, otherwise eventually your leather strap will get ruined. It's leather, it is what it is, right? But there are 2 different base colors here that you can choose from, plus the Titan Edition one. All of the base ones have stainless steel. They also all have crystal sapphire displays on them. Now, with all that said, the base edition for the Polar Grid X2 Pro costs $750 or 750 euros. That is a $250 price increase over the existing Polar Grid X Pro when it was first announced, or a $220 price increase over the current price of $529, a price which you never pay because it's always on sale for way less than that. So we're talking a 50% price increase on this watch. Oh, the Titan Edition, by the way, the Titan Edition cost $869 or euros. I don't know what to say there. I probably should just let the comment section say what you want to say. I genuinely don't know what to say. Like, there's lots of things I could say, and I think I'll have to save them for my in-depth review. I think the challenge here is that that's a challenge. Like, I mean, I literally don't know how else to phrase it other than that is absolutely crazy pants. Like, just, it's mind-bogglingly crazy pants compared to their competitors, which undercut them on price. You have more features. Pick any competitor you want, really. Yeah, I don't know. This is a beautiful strap, by the way, but I'm just talking the $750 for the regular edition is, yeah, so there you go. Now, with that said, I've got this epic adventure planned where I'll put this thing like through its ultimate paces, and definitely not with this strap though. That would kill that strap real darn quick. So certainly hit that subscribe button now so you can get that whole video once it pops out. I think it's gonna be awesome. It could be miserable. Frankly, it could really be miserable, but I'm hoping for awesome. Have a good one.